problems. And we know that isn't the case. I mean, for one thing, we have this interesting data that I reported before, which ultimately demonstrates that negative experiences aren't even linked to customer retention. There's this original case from Sun Microsystems. You remember I talk about this in a previous video where they looked at their customers and they separated them into the two groups, and the customer who had negative experience stayed longer than the customers who'd never had a negative experience. And we've then replicated that in our data, showing that it's about a 2-to-1, like 2x longer lifespan on average for customers who've had negative experiences versus customers who've never had a negative experience. So clearly, resolving problems is the wrong frame of mind when you're thinking about customer retention. Now, when you're thinking about customer satisfaction, yeah, perhaps that might be the right place to focus. But we also know that customer satisfaction does not correlate at all with customer retention. So focusing on these trigger issues, these negative experiences or problems, it's ineffective. And it's because those are not the cause of the failure, right? Making customers, eliminating problems doesn't lead customers to be successful. And that's why fundamentally rescuing customers is not the same as making them successful. And that's based on the reality that the primary reason customers churn is that they didn't achieve or perceive measurable results. And that's what the research shows. By far, the most consistent correlate, the primary predictor and therefore driver of customer retention in the long run is measurable results. And that's why being proactive matters so much. Because if what matters is results, then we have to orient everything we do about driving results. And the issue is that results take time. So being reactive, even if you're focused on results, jumping in when results clearly haven't arrived, it's too late. I need the time to be able to work with the customer to produce results. Why is that? Well, it has to do with what causes results. Because, well, you'll remember that I sort of back into this. If you start at the end and say, look, what drives retention in the long run is measurable results, then what do we have to have achieved in order to get that retention? Well, we have to have achieved measurable results. Okay, so what do we have to do in order to achieve measurable results? And the central factor in that, as you'll recall, is customer behavior change. The primary reason customers achieve results is because they change their behavior in ways that take advantage of the way the solution produces benefits. And so what that means on a simple level is that customer results come after customer behavior change. So if you want to produce customer results, you have to first produce customer behavior change, and then after some time, results arrive. So that's the basic mechanics of it. And that's why if we truly want to rescue a customer, we have to focus on changing their behavior. And normally we need some time to do that. By the time a customer is conscious that they're failing or that they've failed, it's generally too late. Most of the time, they're not in the mood at that point to go back to the beginning, reassess their behavior, make significant changes, and then patiently wait for the results. We had that moment, and now we're past it, and it's very difficult to rebuild that. That's, I would say, the main reason why rescues don't work for most customers. And then, well, why don't they work even when they appear to have worked? Well, back to the logic, which is that we focus the rescue around some problem or issue or set of issues, and resolving those appeared to address the need. But what's underneath that is that it doesn't make them successful. You've solved problems, but you haven't done what it takes to produce results. And if they're not getting results, they're still going to churn. And so that's why I say that the fundamental function of a high-performing customer success team is the ability to predict churn. Because we have to know fundamentally that a customer is failing before they do. That's when they're still willing to address needs, behavior changes that are important for them to make that'll produce those results. And I need time, right, in order for not only those changes to take place, but then whatever time needs to elapse before results start to improve. So this has a very important implication. It means that in order to prevent churn, we actually have to become really good at predicting churn, right? So that's why, in some senses, our abilities to address or help customers or solve problems are not the most important priority competencies that we need in a high-performing customer success team. What we need primarily is to start with the ability to clearly be able to predict churn. And how can you do that? How do you know when a customer is going to fail? That exposes actually a problem with many of our customer risk indicators, which is that the alarm goes off too late. Now, some of our customer risk indicators are just false, like customer satisfaction. They're not related to customer retention at all. So those are of no help. But there are customer risk indicators that we look at that are actually highly, strongly correlated with customer failure. So, for instance, customers stop using the product or ramp down significantly their use of the product. That's a strong indicator that this customer's failed or failing. Or another example is they stop responding or engaging. Again, a bad sign, very strongly correlated with failure. The problem is that both of those alerts go off too late. By the time we know they're failing, it's almost always too late to solve the problem fundamentally. Customers have lost their patience, and we've run out of time and willingness and resources to go after the real core issue. So indicators of failure can be highly correlated and very strong indicators without being very useful. And so that's why I say, drops in utilization or engagement are both very good indicators of failure. They're just too late. They're lagging indicators. I can't win operating on lagging indicators. They don't predict failure. They just tell you when it's happened. And I'm talking about failure here, of course, not churn. There's plenty of indications like that still come before the cancellation of the contract, right? But again, not terribly helpful. What I need is an indicator of failure, right? When the customer's checked out, when this is over, when we're out of willingness, goodwill, time, money, etc. So what we're trying to track are indicators of failure, and those are lagging indicators of failure. What we need are leading indicators, right? What we need are indicators that happen before failure, and hopefully quite a bit before failure, so that we have some time to deal with them. So how can we know customers are failing even before they know? Well, go back to the real cause. Customer behavior changes at the heart of all of this. And so for every key result that a customer would value, there's always something the customer has to do to achieve that result. There are things we do, there are things they have to do. And the best leading indicators are those customer behaviors, because very simply, to get the result, they have to make a change. If they don't make a change, we already know they're not going to get the result, right? Very simple. That's why customer behavior change is the ultimate early warning system. That's how you know in advance customers are failing. And in fact, we know using this method, we know even before the customer knows in most cases. By that early stage, when we see customers not doing one or more things that are critical to get results, we already know they're not going to get results down the road. And that may be a long time or a short time, depending on the way your product produces benefits. But we know before they know. Normally, that's a period when they still think things are going fine. They haven't expected a result correctly, and they're not aware, typically, just how impactful their failure to make some change or do some action is on getting those results. And so this is the moment, if we can detect it, when we can jump in, we have time to address the issue, and we can we can deal with it successfully and get them back on track. And that's been my experience. So then the question is, which behaviors are we tracking? What are we watching, right? What is our early warning system in any given case? Well, it varies by product, but there's a simple way to answer that question. The behaviors you want to track, the ones that are the best leading indicators, are the ones that are necessary for the customer to get results. Now, your solution or product may produce multiple results, in which case there may be different behaviors in each case. Many products, it's really just one set of 1 or 2 or 3 key behaviors. So this isn't extraordinarily complex. And remember, I talked about this before, we only have to focus on the behaviors initially that drive first results. Because the biggest difference between customers that stay and those that don't are the customers who got some measurable results. Phenomenal measure results do improve long-term retention, but they're not necessary for most customers. Those customers who get any results stay massively longer than customers who get no results. That's the big opportunity. And then you can, of course, take customers from some results to more and all the way up to great results. But the critical jump is from no results to some results. Therefore, we can focus on the behaviors that are at the beginning, the basic behaviors, and it's usually just 1 or 2 or at most 3. 3, by the way, is an inordinately complex situation. We typically don't see that. We typically see 1 behavior, sometimes 2, very rarely 3. And what that tells us is that this isn't a very complex way to set up a leading indicator system. You can actually set up your early warning system pretty effectively with just that basic understanding of the connection between the key results that customers come to get and their critical behavior changes that they must action in order to produce those results. And by the way, this is why having a customer results strategy is so powerful, because you have to identify the customer behaviors that matter. They depend on what the result is the customer expects. So clarifying what that key result or key results are generates clarity around what behaviors will matter. And it also connects in their minds clearly. If we want this result, we have to do these behaviors. And that's profoundly transformative to the customer relationship. To say it explicitly, to put it in writing in front of both of us, the customer and me, to see clearly, if you want this result, this is what you'll need to do. This is what we'll do. This is the solution you'll need. Having that clarity is incredibly powerful. That's the most transformative practice that the agent does. If you want to know how does the agent take responsibility for customer results, they do so by generating clarity around the customer results strategy in writing. What are the key results? How are they measured and how much will be successful? What solution do they need? What are all the parts they'll need to achieve that? And what behaviors will they need to change or action to be able to achieve those results? So that's what's powerful about this. And this is what puts you in a position to predict customer failure and be proactive and shift out of that reactive mode. You identify the key results for the customer. You teach them why and how to change behaviors. You track those behavior change, which are those leading indicators, 1 or 2, sometimes 3, very rarely. It's a simple way to do this. Does it require more work? Sure. There has to be some way for us to systematically track which customers are engaging in the behavior and which are not. The typical place you do this is in onboarding, where you actually have, in many cases, an actual interaction. We're meeting with the customer. We're following up on things. That's a great place to do it, because in many cases, you just have to do this manually. It's not going to pop out of the software, right? There's no indicator that, in addition to logging on and using the system, which is a utilization indicator, we care about that. But that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about behavior change. There are other things typically that must happen for our customer to be able to translate and leverage the tool, the product, the solution, whatever it is, into producing benefits for them. And so normally we have to talk about those behaviors by walking through a customer results strategy and then follow up. Did you do it? And indicate and track that in your CRM, whatever you're doing. Track that behavioral indicator, and you will have by far the best predictor of long-term retention than any of the other sort of lagging indicators. Now, I like to track them both, right? I need to know if for whatever reason we missed it and a customer is failing. There are things that are worth trying. I'm not saying that's worthless. I'm just saying you can't build an effective overall high functioning, high retention motion around pure reactivity. You have to build this leading indicator model. And when you do, you get ahead of problems. So this has an interesting implication. It means that potentially a customer would be marked red or at risk in your internal dashboard, even when they don't think they are. And that's a real mental shift, right? People tend to think that a customer's red when they say they're red, or that's the best or primary indicator that a customer is in trouble, at risk, because they say they are. They're indicating that in some way. I think most people realize what's wrong with that, and this is the extreme answer to that. This is the real solution to that, right? So if a customer is in onboarding and they've missed the milestone where they needed to have made some behavior change or take some action, that customer's red. Now, I don't need to tell them they're red, but we need to kick into action to address that failure, that missing change. And we'll only do that if we're tracking it and if we're indicating that that customer's red. And then we're in a position to challenge them, primarily because the customer results strategy, which we established with the customer at the beginning, here are your key results, how they'll be measured, what the key solution is, and what you'll have to do to achieve them. That results strategy puts us in a position where there's no surprises. I can come back to them and say, hey, I see that you haven't done X. Well, remember, we talked about this. You're going to need to do that, or we're going to have to adjust the results that you're expecting to achieve. And so it's no longer a situation where challenging customers is some kind of controversial, confrontational moment, right? In fact, we all are clear on this. And that's exactly what my experience has been. If you establish a customer results strategy and you're clear about this from the beginning, later when you come back and say, hey, it looks like you didn't do X, the typical customer response overwhelmingly for me has been, yeah, you're right. Yeah, well, here's what happened. My response is, no problem. Let's figure out how to get you back on track. And if there's no way to do that for some unforeseeable reason we didn't know about before, then let's find another way to see what we can do to achieve that. If we absolutely can't, we are going to have to adjust our expected results because that was critical for getting those results. And I don't get conflict. I don't get negative pushback from customers in that situation because all of this was outlined from the beginning. And they understand I'm actually working on their behalf. I'm on their side of the table. This is me trying to figure out how to get them results. That's why I call this the agent. You're their agent. You have taken on their objectives as yours. You've made their benefit your priority. And that's what an agent does. And I think that's why it's such a powerful mode of operating. If you've experienced this tension where you don't know if you should challenge a customer about something they're doing wrong or failing to do, it's largely because we've put ourselves in a position where we're not allowed to, in a way. We haven't qualified ourselves by being so reactive, right? We've essentially said, look, you know your business. It's not my place to say. Well, then when I try to say, I've kind of broken my own, commitment to a certain degree. And that's why I think the agent, from the beginning, building the customer results strategy, being clear on what they'll have to do to achieve results, is so profoundly effective. I don't have to change my personality. The agent is not a personality. It's a simple way of operating. You connect the dots for the customers between their results and the behavior they'll have to do, whatever their actions are. And they understand now that every time you talk about that, you're on their side. You're working for them, with them to achieve those results. It's really powerful for the relationship. And then tracking those behaviors, seeing them indicate how this customer is going to go. Finally, we measure results. And I've talked about this before. I won't go into a lot of depth, but that's the last thing. If you want to know what the ultimate lagging indicator is, in my opinion, it's measured results. Now, what's interesting is measured results still tend to be a little bit ahead of some of those other measures, right? So compare measured results to like disengagement from the platform, companies who stop using the product. Well, normally there's a lag, right? Normally it's after they feel disappointed and start to become aware that results have not materialized that they start to disengage. So typically, even measured results are more leading than some of our other lagging indicators. But I consider them a lagging indicator because it's the outcome. Yes, it's ultimately the cause of churn, but I think it's the best measure of failure. And then the customer's consciousness of that failure may be quick to respond to that lack of measured results, or it may take some time. So those are the two anchors, I think, of a really powerful customer risk warning system. The early warning is key behavior changes, yes or no. And the end point, the other end of that measure is, are they achieving measurable results? And those two are by far the best indicators of customer risk. The others are valuable. They should be, well, some of them are valuable. We've talked about those that aren't, like customer satisfaction scores. But those that are valuable should be on there, but we should be clear which is a leading indicator and which is a lagging indicator. And here's another thing to think about. Which is more important to act on? Well, I made the case that it's the leading indicator because now I have time to address it, time, willingness, etc., to address it and get it turned around. Well, that's absolutely true. And when you think about it, those leading indicators are therefore much more likely to be successful. So that's the other side of this. Not only do I have time, but it means that efforts I put on leading indicators, addressing, bad leading indicators, is going to pay off at a higher rate than efforts spent downstream after a customer's gotten into trouble or failed. Well, I hope this is helpful. Obviously, you know this, but I only publish videos about once a week. And so if these are interesting, you'll be much more likely to see them if you subscribe to my channel and click the little bell, etc. Anyway, thanks and see you next time.